Our World War II veterans are from the greatest generation friends and their fellow soldiers. And Father, we ask that you embrace these soldiers and their families, to cover them in your grace, to cover them in your protection. And Father, we ask that you lead and guide them. And Father, as we move forward in the ceremony today to celebrate those sacrifices, we just ask that you be with us in this time of fellowship. And Father, we ask that you bless each and every one as they leave this place when they return to their homes and their businesses and their loved ones, Father. But most of all, Father, we ask that you bless those that are missing their loved one that paid with the ultimate sacrifice to touch their lives. And Father, we just ask that you bless the meal that we will receive, to bless it to the nourishment of our bodies, and bless our hands to your service. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Remain standing.
Colors, attention, carry, colors, forward, march. March time, march. Colors, hold. Colors, march. Present, arm.
Let's everybody say, pledge allegiance to the flag. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for Miss Anna Clark to sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see?
Mark time. Mark. Color. Hold. Order. Color. Port. Arm. Forward. Mark.
Ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests, welcome. We're delighted and pleased to have you here with us this afternoon for this event in honor of the veterans, World War II veterans that represent Bladen County. I would like to take just a moment to recognize some of the folks that have joined us on board here today. I want to thank U.S. House of Representatives, Mr. David Rouser, for his participation today, along with his aide, Chance Lambert. In addition, I'd like to thank Congressman Robert Pettinger, who is also a House of Representatives. In addition, I'd also like to thank some of the mayors of some of the towns around us who have joined us today. Mayor Sylvia Campbell, Mr. Rufus Duckworth, and Mr. Golden-Womble. So I want to thank you all for participating and being a part of this recognition ceremony today. This is a very unique occasion, and I'm very pleased that you've chosen to take part in this with us. The Rotary Clubs of Bladenboro and Elizabethtown certainly would like to welcome you to this commemorative occasion in honor of these veterans of World War II. We represent the best of Bladen County. It has been said that if a nation forgets the veterans who fought its wars, it forgets its own history. The World War II veterans whom we honor today represent men who, in the most critical part of our nation's history, offered to set aside their own dreams for their own future in the hope that their service to the United States of America would secure our nation's future. All of these men, without exception, offered their lives as a blank check to be filled in as the nation saw fit. Some of these men served for only a short time, while others served for the duration of the entire war. None of them knew or could have possibly known where the fortunes of war would take them, nor what would be required of them, and yet every single one of them offered themselves in service to our country. And in the face of a conflict which had far-ranging consequences and was of global proportions, this sort of patriotism and self-sacrifice is almost unheard of. The war ended 72 years ago, and it was a war of unprecedented scale and violence. But on a human scale, it was through the strength, the resolve, and the efforts of individuals such as those whom we honor today that the tyranny of fascism and totalitarianism was defeated. Each generation since World War II has faced its own challenges, but never on the epic scale that these gentlemen did. When our nation called, they answered. They trained, they shipped out, and they served, sometimes in the worst places imaginable, and oftentimes under the worst possible circumstances. They served in whatever capacity was required, and yet they endured. Men and the women of this generation have often been called the greatest generation, and rightfully so, for perhaps we may never see again the sort of patriotic fiber and tenacity which they possessed. Time has seasoned these men, but it has never dimmed their valor, nor what they accomplished. Not merely for the United States of America. Entire nations around the world today are free from the scourge of war, because of men such as these offering themselves in the pursuit of liberty and for the right of each person everywhere to live a life of dignity and worth. It is men such as these who have set the standard for us. All of these men were able to return to civilian life, and in many different ways they were able to pick up the pieces of their respective lives and move on. They are family men. They all became men of business or professional stature, offering their time and their talents back into their communities. Bladen County has been both blessed and enriched by the contributions of these men, the veterans of World War II. Gentlemen, we thank you. This time, we want to welcome back the drill team from the Paul R. Brown Leadership Academy. Gentlemen, when you're ready.
Drill team. Now, let's hit forward, arch.
Motion granted.
Thank you, sir. Forward. March. Who are we? We are. All on proud. Oi. High Coast. Realty. Oh. Sir, the call-out round has requested permission to leave your area.
Motion granted.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul R. Brown drill team from the Leadership Academy. Thank you. At this point, we are moving into a section here where we would like to recognize, of course, the veterans themselves. And the Rotary Clubs of Bladenboro and Elizabethtown have prepared some items in honor and in recognition of their service. We would like to, we have these gentlemen lined up in front of us, as you can see, and I certainly hope most of you have had the opportunity to meet with them as they came in. And we will introduce them to you as we go down the line. The Bladenboro and Elizabethtown clubs, first of all, would like to offer these gentlemen a medallion which we have cast in their honor and in recognition of their service. And if you will hold with me, we will be bringing those to you. We also have a ball cap. Look, let's face it, every serviceman likes a ball cap. These guys are certainly no exception. But this ball cap is a little bit special. And in honor and in recognition of this service, we have prepared a cap that specifically notes that they are a World War II veteran, Layton County. The medallion represents the grateful thanks of the Rotary Club of the two cities, and this will accompany that hat as well. We have started with Mr. Clifford Allen, the first gentleman to my left here, who was PFC, United States Army, served from September 44 to February 46. Mr. Allen fought in the 14th Armored Division until the Germans surrendered. He was also the recipient himself of several combat regiments. The next gentleman in line is Mr. Jasper Evans, who served in the United States Navy. He was a motor machinist mate, 3rd class, 1939 to 1946. Mr. Evans served primarily in the Pacific and served on board the USS Hager, APD-80. Our next gentleman in the line, Mr. Johnny Evans, who was U.S. Army. I'm not sure how that worked out in the family, but Johnny Evans was with the United States Army. He was a technician 5th grade from 1945 to 1947. Mr. Evans served in the 3rd Army Headquarters, European Command, and was present later, I understand, during the famous Nuremberg trials. Is that right, John? Yes, sir. Our next recipient, Mr. Richard J. Frady. Mr. Frady was in the United States Navy and was a pharmacist mate, 1944 to 1946. Mr. Frady served stateside at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, and in fact was an EEG specialist serving with the first EEG, or electroencephalograph unit, that we had in the United States Navy. To the left of Mr. Frady, Mr. William J. Hare, United States Navy, an aviation bosun's mate who served from 1940 to 1944. Mr. Hare served in the Pacific Theater on board the USS Ticonderoga, which was one of 14 Essex-class carriers built in the United States Navy during World War II. To the left of Mr. Hare, Mr. Jimmy Heath, James Heath, United States Navy, and a seaman 1st class. Mr. Heath worked in the Hull Division, I understand, February 45 to July 46, served primarily in the Pacific Theater. He was served aboard the USS Boxer, also a carrier, and saw service in several areas such as Pearl Harbor, Guam, Okinawa, the Philippines, and Japan. Beside him is Mr. Rufus K. Hester. He was a U.S. Army technician, 5th grade, served from September 44 to June 1946. Mr. Hester served in the European Theater of War. He was the recipient of several service ribbons. Interestingly, Mr. Hester traveled to Europe aboard the Queen Elizabeth and later returned on its sister ship in the United States on board the Queen Mary. Beside Mr. Hester, we have Mr. James R. Inman, United States Army, private 1st class, served with the 551st Battalion of the 3rd Army under General George Patton. Mr. Inman was a gunner, a half-track gunner, and a rifleman. And he was part of the landing at Normandy on a landing craft, interestingly enough, named Hogan's Goat. Mr. Inman, it should be noted, is one of 12 decorated North Carolina World War II veterans inducted into the French Order of the Legion of Honor. He is also a Purple Heart recipient. Beside Mr. Inman, we have Mr. Fletcher Kemp, who was our only member who was in the United States Army Air Corps. He was a staff sergeant and a crew chief, March 1943 to September 1945. Mr. Kemp served in the European Theater as an air crew chief on board, he was part of the 95th Air Squadron, flying C-47 cargo planes. Mr. Kemp was also part of the operation which transported the 82nd Airborne troops in on D-Day. He was also part of the effort to support Patton's push into Nazi Germany. Mr. Bartram Moore served in the United States Army. He was a radio communicator and Morse code operator. He served in the Army from 1944 to 1945. He initially thought he was going to Germany to assist with agriculture, but later on was reassigned to Japan. And as he noted in a conversation, as far as the eye could see, it was nothing but rubble. Interestingly enough. Mr. Robert Simmons, Bobby Simmons, United States Navy, and was a seaman 1st class. He served on a motor patrol gunboat, as a matter of fact, and participated in the invasion of Okinawa. 4 of our patrol gunboats at that time were lost or damaged. Mr. Simmons made it, and he served on board this EGM during the invasion of Okinawa. They were numbered, not named, by the way. Beside the space where Mr. Simmons is, there is, we introduce Mr. Edward M. Wallace, United States Navy, a seaman 1st class, May 1944 to March 1946. Mr. Wallace was assigned to the Naval Air Station stateside in DeLand, Florida, and assisted with pre-flight training and readiness for pilots being trained for the war zone. He was ready to go to sea, and all of a sudden the war ended. It was over. It was a startling transformation. Beside Mr. Wallace, we have Mr. Robert White, United States Army Sergeant, who who entered the war in 1945. Mr. White was assigned to the 872nd Aviation Engineers, and his job was to assist with aircraft runway construction and/or repair, as the case may be, of course. Mr. White, in fact, was on a troop train to California on August 6, 1945, when the atomic bomb was dropped off Hiroshima. He was later reassigned to the 46th Aviation Engineering Battalion to assist with new airport construction in what became post-war Japan. Mr. Harry Womble, unable to attend today, but Mr. Harry Womble was a private in the United States Army, 1942 to 1946. Mr. Womble served in the European theater, arriving in Europe, interestingly enough, also on board the converted ocean liner Queen Elizabeth. Mr. Womble was a part of the Army infantry units which crossed the Rhine into Germany and also saw combat service in France, Belgium, Austria, and England, and was also a gunner on 8-inch howitzers. Lastly, we have Mr. James Wooten. Mr. Wooten was in the United States Navy and was a metalsmith, 3rd class, serving from 1942 to February 1946. Mr. Wooten served in the Pacific Theater as well as the Atlantic and took part in the amphibious force operations in the South Pacific, an operation known as Acorn 21, which was the Battle of Kwajalein on the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Mr. Wooten received the Purple Heart with 2 stars. These are our veterans, and we have chosen to recognize them with the Rotary Medallion in recognition of that service, along with these unique ball caps that I trust they will wear with pride. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to 2 other gentlemen who have offered to present themselves today. Mr. David Rouser, U.S. Congressman from District 5, North Carolina, and he will be followed by Congressman Robert Pittenger, U.S. House of Representatives. They have something which they would like to say and offer on behalf of our veterans. Gentlemen.
I'm David Rouser, and we've had the great honor and opportunity to represent the 7th Congressional District in North Carolina, which includes a portion of Layton County, and I'm so honored to have the privilege to be here with my good friend and colleague, Congressman Robert Pittenger, who represents the other portion of Layton County. So Layton County gets a double punch in the U.S. Congress with both me and Robert doing everything we can for you. It is a great, great honor to be here with you today, and I commend the Rotary Clubs of Layton County for choosing to honor our World War II survivors and veterans. And gentlemen, I just can't tell you what a great honor it is for us to be here. I can't tell you how much appreciation we have for your service, your sacrifice, and your dedication, not only during the time of war, but afterwards, in making this country the greatest country mankind has ever known. And in honor of that, and accommodation of that, I have a letter for each of you, and which I will distribute at the appropriate time. And now I'll turn it over to Congressman Pittenger to find out a few words as well.
Thank you, Congressman Rouser. What a privilege to be here with each of you all today. As Congressman Rouser and I walk up those worn stone steps each day of that Capitol to go vote, we look at that dome and what that dome represents: freedom, liberty, opportunity, unprecedented in the world. We have that to share because of these men. So I've come to say to you, thank you for your commitment, your courage, for your valor, for being out there on our behalf. I have the privilege of seeing our soldiers that travel around the globe. This last week I hosted a group of young men and one lady who enter our academies. And they know the price of liberty and freedom. So we are coming with a deep sense of respect and gratitude to each of you. And to that end, I brought for you today a flag that has been flown over the U.S. Capitol for you to have. You can share these. Certificate, Jackson Evans. Thank you. Johnny Evans. Yes. Richard Green. Thank you, sir. Billy Clerk. And here. James Heath. Thank you, sir. Gideon Tyson. Thank you, sir. Drew Rockland. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Rockland, what station? Martin Boyd. David Wallace. Brother White. No, that's it. Dave Wood. Thank you. God bless you.
Mr. Wumble isn't here, but his family's here. So, the mayor of White Lake, his son, is going to accept his hat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is anyone here from Mr. Robert Bobby Simmons' family on his behalf?
Gentlemen, thank you. I thank Congressman Rouser and Congressman Pittenger for their recognition and contribution today. Again, may I ask if there's anyone representing the family of Bobby Simmons here today, would you please let me know? We would like to make sure he gets these items as well. We would like to bring this to a close. And at this point, I would like to recognize my fellow Rotarian, Dr. Darrell Page, who will close us out this afternoon.
What a great day. I all appreciate the service. Thank you very much. Today, we've had the special privilege to peek inside the lives of men that served during this turbulent days and frightening nights of World War II. These men each have a special story, as you've heard today. Some carried machine guns, mortars, lived in foxholes, and yes, they charged the mountains in face of blistering gunfire in Germany, France, Italy, North Africa, the jungles of Okinawa, the Philippines, and New Guinea. Others with us today provided support, like flying in barrels of gas so General Patton could maintain his charge to defeat our enemies. And let us not forget those that served and supported, such as mechanics, seamen, hospital attendants, pharmacy mates, and all the other jobs that were so critical to the victory over Germany and the Axis powers. Many of our World War II veterans say, and I've heard this from many, I didn't do much in the war. I was on a ship that provided security on the East Coast. Or I simply taught young soldiers how to repair jeeps. Or I was only an orderly or a medic who helped the wounded and the suffering. Folks, all that served in this clash of civilizations, all that sacrificed, all that came to the aid of their countries, are truly heroes, and what they gave us with their blood, their sweat, their courage, and their determined spirit is the freedom that we all enjoy today. The opportunity to live in a country that values life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They, by their dedicated service, came to the call in the early years of the 1940s and risked their lives to save America and the world from the horrible grip of fascism. This meant leaving their families and farms in Bladen County and the beautiful Cape Fear River and White Lake, where they swam, fished, hunted, and enjoyed the natural beauty of Bladen. And in so doing, many traveled through uncharted waters, sacrificing their youth, their freedom, and their lives to join a military crusade that became the most powerful fighting force on the face of the earth. By their honor, courage, and commitment, they defeated evil in the world and did not allow the evil axis to enter the shores of our homeland. All of these men are truly heroes. For us gathered here today, we've had a special opportunity to experience firsthand a taste of the flesh and blood and fighting spirit of Bladen County heroes. So as we conclude our celebration of these World War II heroes, let us never forget their courage and service to our country, and forever realize that freedom is not free. Evil does exist in the world, which must be confronted. All of us must stand up to defeat the enemies that will destroy America and freedom and liberty around the world. Today we see and applaud these World War II heroes that did not hesitate to come to the aid of their country. This was a time when the world trembled with fear and tribulation, and when the German panzers rolled over Europe and the Japanese flag hung over the Philippines and the Pacific world. They came forth from Bladen County and around the country and did their job well. Let us never forget our World War II veterans and their heroism, sacrifice, and contribution to freedom throughout the world. God bless America, and God bless our World War II veterans.
We thank you for joining us with the Elizabethtown Rotary Club and the Bladenboro Rotary Club for our recognition ceremony for our World War II veterans. Tell me just a little bit, what does this mean to you to be here today, to be present with these veterans?
Today is a day to remember those, as we have this past weekend. Those who gave their lives for our liberty, these men put out their lives in defense of those liberties. So we come in a special sense of respect and honor to recognize that our freedoms we have today are because of them. And without them and their courage and their valor, we wouldn't be where we are today.
That's a great idea. It is a great idea.
And Congressman, tell me a little bit about what the greatest generation means to you when you hear that term, the greatest generation.
When you think of the greatest generation, I think of my dad. He would be 100 now. These are self-made men. They grounded out. Nothing was given to them. They had no privileges. They had nothing. They started with nothing. And as a result, we have a country that flourishes because this generation came back from war and they rebuilt our country. They rebuilt our economy. They did an incredible work that all of us could enjoy the benefits that we have today.
Well, Congressman, you made a presentation today to these veterans. Tell us a little bit about that presentation.
I wanted to give them something very special. They received a flag flown over the United States Capitol in their behalf. And they will take that with them knowing that as that flag flew, it flew in their honor. It flew among other great people who have stood for liberty and freedom. And when I walk up those worn stone steps of the Capitol and I look at the dome and I see what that dome represents, freedom, liberty, and opportunity unique to the world, we are dedicated, we're committed to these men who stood strong and courageously for freedom and fought on our behalf. So that flag represents the greatness and the freedoms of this country, which I wanted them to have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Congressman, and thank you for attending us today.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. Good evening, and we're here with Mr. David Rouser, the representative for District 7, United States Congress. Mr. Rouser, we thank you so much for coming out to our Elizabethtown Rotary Club this afternoon for this event with our veterans. Tell me a little bit what this means to be present here with these veterans today.
Well, it's a great honor and privilege. They're known as the greatest generation for a reason. They have great dedication and heart and contributed mightily to the country, not only during the war effort, but afterwards. Helped make America the greatest country known to mankind. So it's really a great honor to be here, and I commend the Elizabethtown Rotary for being willing and thinking of doing this. I think it's just a great tribute to our surviving World War II veterans.
Well, tell me something. When you hear the term the greatest generation, what does that make you think of?
Well, great is exceptional. That's what I think of. And if you consider the mammoth of the task before them during that war, during World War II, the nature of that war, the brutality of that war, the duration of that war, it really took great men of faith and courage. And those are the ingredients, quite frankly, for greatness. And so I think they deserve that title, have earned it.
Well, now you made a presentation today to these veterans. Tell me what that presentation was.
It was a letter of commendation for their service, for their commitment to the country, and for all that they've sacrificed for the country. And I'd like to add, too, not only the veterans that survived, but their families have made a tremendous sacrifice over the years as well. And we shouldn't forget that either. And of course, obviously coming off of Memorial Day, we certainly need to keep in mind all those who paid the ultimate price, sacrificed everything, including their life, for our country.
Well, now, this is the anniversary of World War II. We're celebrating that. Tell me when we're thinking about celebrating that anniversary, is there anything coming up in Congress to celebrate or to mark this anniversary?
Well, I'm sure that there will be. We usually have a resolution of some sort where we make special mention of anniversaries of that type. And so I'm sure we'll be passing one of those.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming out and supporting this event, and thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Absolutely. Great to be with you.